Welcome to the CondoVulturesTV podcast with your host, Peter Zalewski, a Miami real estate broker, Wall Street consultant, and expert witness. This podcast is focused on identifying real estate buying opportunities in the South Florida condo market of Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties. The CondoVulturesTV podcast is not authorized by the South Florida real estate industry and will most likely annoy many of the region's talking heads. This podcast will feature straight talk and salty language that could be offensive to some. Please remember that past investment success does not determine future gains, especially in South Florida's volatile condo market. For more information, please visit CondoVultures.com.
Welcome to Miami Reporters Roundtable. I'm your host, Peter Zalewski from Condo Vultures. You are tuning into a podcast where we're going to have current and former journalists kicking around some thoughts about some of the biggest stories that have occurred within the last week. The premise of the podcast is basically give you some straight talk. Miami and South Florida, its real estate market is filled with a lot of fluff, a lot of hyperbole. So what we're going to try to do with this podcast is cut through it all and sort of give you some perspective of what actually might be going on. So before we go ahead and introduce our three panelists, in addition to myself, I should tell you I was a journalist for 13 years. After that, I wrote a column for the Miami Herald as well as the Miami Real Deal. I went into real estate, and that's what I do now. I do consulting and occasionally some brokering. But that being said, I never sort of lost that thirst for trying to bring some clarity to the marketplace. Why? Because I think the market trades when there's good information. And unfortunately, South Florida's real estate market is filled with a bunch of bad information. And I should say salty language is permissible. So if I curse or anybody else curses, don't be surprised. So let me go ahead and introduce everyone, and then I will introduce you to the rules of engagement. We're going to start off with a journalist. He did it for 25 years. He had stints for a variety of different places, including the Tampa Tribune. Guy called John Gruss. John has a public relations marketing firm right now called Gruss Communications. And if you want to reach him, you can get him at GrussPR.com. That's GRUSSPR.com. What's going on, Mr. Gruss?
Hey, Peter. Great to be with you on this beautiful, balmy South Florida day.
And we are on the eve of a Miami Heat victory in the second round of the NBA Finals, which is a perfect segue into one of our other journalists. Gentleman is out of New York. He's been down in Miami since the 1980s. He was a journalist, worked 20 plus years over a variety of different publications, including the South Florida Business Journal, where he wrote about white collar crime, did business stories, and he wrote about restaurants. I say reviews. He says he did features. That's no one else but John Fakler. If you want to get a hold of John, who does public relations and marketing, you can get him at Fakler@consultant.com. That's Fakler @consultant singular.com. What's going on, Mr. Fakler?
Hey, Peter, great to be back. I'm excited to be back. Thank you for the slightly erroneous introduction, but it's great to be here.
Oh, that's great. In fact, I think you have a bone to pick with me. We went on for about 4 or 5 podcasts after you announced that a quarterback from the Green Bay Packers, a guy called Aaron Rodgers, soon to be Hall of Famer, was coming to the New York Jets. You wore all your Jets garb. We busted your balls for a good 4 podcasts or so. Well, it looks like the trade has actually occurred, and boy, did the New York Jets, your team, the rival of the Miami Dolphins, which is where we are recording this, boy, did the Green Bay Packers rob you guys for Aaron Rodgers. Any comments?
No comments. I'm happy with the deal. I'm happy with the draft. Dolphins better watch out. That's all I got to say.
Fantastic. And now our rotating journalist this week. This is going to be our first appearance on our podcast. We've been doing a podcast since back in 2020. Been trying to get her on there. She finally carved out some time, and we're very fortunate to have her. She's been a journalist for over a decade. Right now, she's a staff writer over at The Real Deal. She's writing about real estate. And much like many of the other journalists we bring online, she knows how to get in there and crack some skulls. It's no one else but Lidia Dinkova. Lidia, how's it going?
Great, Peter. Nice to be here. Thank you.
That's fantastic. We are happy to have you here. And remember, salty language is permissible. Not that you're going to do it, but some of the other two on this podcast might slip or so. Lidia, why don't you share with the audience, if they want to get a hold of you, if they want to pitch you a story, maybe they want to sell you a condo. What is the best way for them to reach out and get you? Is it Twitter? Is it email? What would you recommend?
Both. So email and Twitter. My handle is pretty easy. It's just at Lidia Dinkova, just my name. And my email is just basically my first name, period, my last name at therealdeal.com. So
easy
give
enough.
me a shout. Yeah.
Absolutely. Easy enough. Well, now that I've introduced you to all of our panelists for this particular week, let me tell you how it's going to roll out. We are going to do 3 segments. The next segment, we're going to talk about 3 stories I handpicked. I sent them off to the journalists, asked them to go ahead and read them. Then they're going to provide some insight. We'll take a break. We'll do another 3 stories, and then we're going to wrap up with a discussion. Discussion is going to be about some layoffs that recently occurred at one of the large major dailies here in the South Florida area. And again, straight talk is what we're after. Let me remind you, if you're listening to the podcast on a traditional platform such as Apple, such as Google, you can actually watch us. We're recording this. So there's video component. Just go to a platform that permits for video, such as Spotify. And if you want to check us out on YouTube, the handle is CondoVulturesTV. That's CondoVulturesTV. And also, too, if you have any comments for us, any questions, maybe you're a Jets fan and you want to give a little pushback because the Miami Dolphins and any of that, we welcome it. Anything you want to say, send it over to us and we will discuss it somewhere on the podcast. In future podcasts, our email address, inquiry@CondoVultures.com, INQUIRY@CondoVultures.com. So with that being said, we're going to take a commercial break. Other side of the break, we're going to get into our first 3 stories.
It's a simple formula, and it works. Buy low, sell high. We're Condo Vultures, and when it comes to your real estate, we help you buy low. At Condo Vultures, we represent the buyer, and now's the time to buy. Log on to CondoVultures.com for more information. CondoVultures.com. And remember, before you sell high, you have to buy low. Featured in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, 60 Minutes, and Time Magazine. Condo Vultures Realty, a licensed Florida real estate brokerage capitalizing on the condo correction since 2006.
Welcome back to the Miami Reporters Roundtable. I'm your host, Peter Zalewski. We're going to get in the first 3 stories that I handpicked, sent off to the journalists, and asked them to read and review. We're fortunate enough that one of the journalists on the panel today actually submitted one of the stories we're going to be discussing. We'll actually be discussing 2 of her stories, 2 stories that appeared in The Real Deal by Lidia. But we're going to start off with John Gruss. John, this is a piece. It's coming out of CNBC. I'm going to read you the headline. I'll read you the first 3 key points that CNBC puts out. Then I'm going to ask you to provide some context. So, headline, JP Morgan Chase takes over First Republic after biggest U.S. bank failure since 2008. And here's the 3 points. Point number 1, JP Morgan acquired all of First Republic's deposits and a substantial majority of assets. Point number 2, the acquisition came after regulators took possession of First Republic, resulting in the 3rd failure of an American bank since March. A 4th bank called Silvergate basically agreed to dissolve itself. And then point number 3, First Republic set off a new wave of concerns last month with revelations that it lost more deposits than expected in March. John, JP Morgan is led by a guy called Jamie Dimon. Jamie Dimon is perceived by many to be one of the smartest bankers on the street. Jamie came out once this acquisition was done. And by the way, there was the Feds closed this bank on Monday. JP Morgan was waiting in the wings. They took it down. Jamie Dimon comes out and says, this is the end of it. John, my question to you is, this is the end of the bank closures, and does that mean it's clear sailing ahead, or what would you give us? Why don't you give us your take on it?
Yeah, well, I'd say probably not. But the thing that really should concern us in South Florida, and particularly with real estate, is that regional and community banks are significant lenders to commercial and residential real estate. I think I heard a statistic today that 70 to 80% of commercial real estate lending is done by regional banks. I don't know if that's accurate, but it's definitely way up there. So the concern is that now these regional banks with deposits flying out the door, they're going to be holding onto that capital and make sure they don't suffer the same fate as First Republic. They can be much less likely to lend to real estate projects anywhere, really, including South Florida. So, I think this is going to have repercussions for the next several years, particularly, with construction developments. And of course, the business of Florida is real estate. So, commercial banks, regional commercial banks, and community banks are big funders of such projects, and that's going to be there's going to be some tightening going on in terms of credit availability for those developers.
No, John, let me ask you a follow-up question. This bank, First Republic, was shut down on a Monday. Traditionally, what happens, anybody doesn't know it. I wrote about banking for a number of years. You were a banking writer. Yeah. You still do. Your clients are still related to the finance industry.
Right.
Why was this bank shut down on a Monday rather than the traditional Friday at 2:30 when the feds come rolling in, they seize a bank they get everything under control. And then the following Monday, a couple days later, there's some sort of a plastic sign over the front, and everybody who's been banking there, it's primarily the same people, but it's a different name. So why a Monday? Was this because it was that much of an emergency, or was this because JP Morgan was negotiating hard, and in order to take down First Republic, they wanted a sweetheart deal, and they couldn't get a deal by Friday?
Well, I mean, the details are still murky, but I mean, the weekend gave everybody an opportunity to get the deal done, something that might not be able to happen during a weekday, And yeah, I remember, during the financial crisis, I was a reporter at the Business Observer in Southwest Florida, and every Friday, my weekend would get shot because on a Friday afternoon after 5 o'clock, another bank would be shut down, So yeah, traditionally it's a Fridays, but I know the banks have been shut down on other days, and I think this was such a big deal. I think it's First Republic's the second largest bank shut down so far in this round, and so I think it was such a big bank that the regulators needed a good weekend to get bids in and make sure a deal could be put together before the markets opened on Monday.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting insight. With that, let's transition over to story number 2. Lidia, we're going to go to you. This is a piece that appeared in The Real Deal. I'll read you the headline. I'll read you the first couple graphs. Maybe you can provide, I don't know if you can provide comment because you wrote about the story, but you could probably give us some good insight. So anything you can share with us would be greatly appreciated. So here's the headline, air quotes, extra pain. Developers with maturing multifamily construction loans face woes. Subhead, a record number of apartments are on tap for completion this year, and mortgages are coming due amid high interest rates and skittish banks. First couple graphs, Lidia, are South Florida emerged as a hot multifamily market during the past 2 years, with droves of out-of-staters moving to the region and rents reaching new heights, promising a windfall for developers. To catch the wave, Henry Torres got a $32.4 million construction loan and started building the 11-story Douglas Enclave, a block north of West Flagler Street in Miami. Despite the bright market forecast, he worked out a cushion with lender Ocean Bank. He got an option to extend the maturity by a year until March, keeping the 3.85% interest rate. Boy, what a good interest rate. He locked in when he recorded the loan back in April 2021. It turned out to be a safety net, allowing him to avoid a costly refinance when interest rates shot up. Lidia, boy, that sounds just like what John was talking about. People go in with interest rates on commercial real estate. Lo and behold, you have adjustable rates. Suddenly you look at what the interest rate is today. You might have some developers looking to sell or trying to figure out how the hell they're going to keep these things afloat if they can't jack up rents. So what did you find in reporting out the story?
Well, it's significant because clearly since late 2020, all we heard is like how great South Florida is, how great the market is doing because of all these out-of-staters, and the rents are really skyrocketing. We outpaced the nation quite a few times, but it's kind of like the reality setting in now because there's something like 22,500 apartment units across the Tri-County region that are expected to be completed this year. Obviously, there could be some delays of some of these, but as soon as they complete them, their construction loans are maturing. So now the reality has hit. Sure enough, our rents are up, but they're not going up by the same rate that they used to in the past 2 years. But we also have to refinance our construction loan and do a construction to perm switch. And lo and behold, interest rates are double what they were. So a lot of developers like Henry Torres work out the safety net in the front end before they start building a project for their construction loan. I can tell you honestly, across the board, even developers I spoke with not featured in this story said that they are grateful that they worked out the safety net and the ability to be able to extend a construction loan instead of having to refinance right away. And across the board, they're all going to be like taking advantage of that and definitely like falling back on this because it's just impossible to refinance now.
So Lidia, a follow-up question based on kind of what you were saying and what John had mentioned about commercial real estate loans. During the build-up to the Great Recession, you had a lot of rentals that went condo. They got converted. Anybody doesn't know the difference between a condo and an apartment building? basically a legal document called the Declaration of Condominium that's filed with the state. State gives approval, property appraiser allocates folios, and lo and behold, you got a condo. It takes about 6 months, costs $100,000, maybe $200,000 now because labor's so tight. Lidia, anybody mentioned to you like an exit strategy might be if they can't actually get an interest rate that's doable, they might look to either A, convert it on their own, or B, sell it to somebody who might try to convert, because we keep hearing that there's a shortage of units, a shortage of supply. Anybody reference that, or they playing the cards close to the vest?
Convert multifamily, like apartments to condos?
Yes.
Yeah. Didn't PMG do that with a project they just finished in Edgewater? I think that they definitely did that. That did come up a lot. That's the only concrete example, but a lot of third-party sources like attorneys and brokers said that would be like a fallback strategy. So for sure, I think we could be seeing more of that.
Wow, interesting. So anybody out there looking for a condo, there might be a condo conversion wave coming down the pike very quick. Whether or not you can qualify for a mortgage and whether or not a bank's going to put money on the street, that's a different story, but we can discuss that later. Story number 3, Mr. Fakler, we're going to go to you. And you got here in the 1980s. You've lived all around South Florida, including some places that I'm not sure if they would have passed their 40-year recertification now under the new legislation due to the collapse of the Champlain Tower South up in Surfside. But I figure you're a good person to come to on this because you've sort of seen everything. So this is coming from CNN. This is the headline. Here's a couple graphs. And then Mr. Fakler, if you could give us your take on it. Residents in South Florida condo building have until Tuesday to evacuate after building deemed unsafe. First couple graphs. Residents of a South Florida condo building have been ordered to evacuate by Tuesday after the building was deemed unsafe during its 6-year building recertification. Typically, building, once it gets about the 40 years, it's got to go ahead, it gets recertified, and then every 10 years afterwards, they have to come in there and recertify it. Not attorney, check with your attorney, but that must be what they're referring to when they say 60 years, because most people tell you it's 40 years. But with the legislation, it's since changed. But anyways, we'll just sort of gloss over that. Let me read that lead again. Residents of South Florida condo building have been ordered to evacuate by Tuesday after the building was deemed unsafe during its 6-year building recertification. During an inspection on April 14th, a building engineer found the Majestic Isle condominium building in North Bay Village, which is a little suburb. It's an enclave between mainland Miami and Miami Beach. It was found to have sagging floors and termite damage and deemed it structurally unsafe. A recent leak from a roof drain caused a partial ceiling collapse last week, and residents from 5 units had already been evacuated, according to a release from the city. And last graph, Mr. Fakler, then I'll ask you to comment. The Majestic Isle building was built in 1960 and has 36 units, about 55 residents. Mr. Fakler, what is your take on this? A, if you were living in one of these buildings, how scared would you be? And B, have you ever been in a building that you've lived in where maybe you were a little bit, concerned about the structural integrity of that property?
No, I've definitely lived in some suspect buildings, but I've never been concerned, back then about structural integrity. Very interesting story. Now, I don't know if this was originally reported by locals.
It was.
The fact that it was picked up by, it was. Okay, because, there was in the story, they didn't mention the flooding that we had. We had some huge flooding, as most people know, in Fort Lauderdale. They had record flooding, 24 inches of rain. We had some bad rain here and there. In the video that was part of the clip, one of the residents was talking about, they suspect that that's what happened because there was the roof actually collapsed and there was water damage, etc. But interestingly enough, they had an aerial shot of this building. This building is very similar to the sunrise, the building collapsed.
Champlain Tower South in Surfside, on the border of Miami Beach.
Only 4 miles away. Right. It's only 4 miles away and it's right on the beach. It's on the sand. And it was suspiciously, similar in design. It's on the sand. I'm wondering how much of a structural issue there is with these older buildings that are built on the sand. Will there be others? I'm sure there will be others. I don't think we're going to have a rash where they all happen at one time, but I think it'll be spread out. Why? The 60-year recertification process, not everybody was built in the 60s. Some were built in the 50s, some were built in the 70s. They weren't built the same week. So we may see a couple of weeks from now or a couple of months from now, another evacuation order. Is it going to be a trend? I think so, but I don't think it's going to be a rash of them because they're so spread out as far as when they were originally constructed.
So Mr. Fakler, we had 98 people die. We had $1 billion settlement paid
That's
out
right.
after Champlain
Right.
Tower South collapsed. From what I'm reading in the story, the only reason the city shut it down is they had a leak in their roof that collapsed. Why wasn't the city out there, or why wasn't something going on now that we have legislation in the state of Florida dealing with the safety of the building? I mean, is this an oversight on behalf of the city, which is a small city, or is there simply just too much out there? What would be your speculation on that? And let me say it's speculation.
Yes, it is speculation. I have suspicions because I'm a suspicious character by nature. But I believe the flooding as a result of the rain may have affected other buildings, but they're not up for this 60-year recertification. So there's no pressure on them to say, okay, you need to evacuate now. I'm not saying it's, I'm just putting it out there that I don't know how many other buildings are in this similar shape that may have been affected by the rains and, are, they're going to find the problems when they do the recertifications. Of course, they're not all being done this week. Like I mentioned earlier, it's going to be spread out, but I expect to see more. I'm not going to say it's going to be a deluge, but there will be, I'm sure, several other buildings going forward. And, certainly if I was a real estate, looking to invest in real estate, if I'm a New Yorker or coming from New Jersey, I'd certainly be wary of any older buildings as far as buying units.
Interesting point. And before we take our commercial break, let me just throw out there, if you are an investor, some of these properties are actually very desirable because you can typically get them at a good price. Assuming you can ride them out and assuming that they don't actually collapse, these are buildings that are perfectly suited for a condo termination where paperwork is filed and lo and behold, a condo reverts back to an apartment building. The site is torn down and lo and behold, you put up something brand new and you charge about four times more per square foot than you would for some of these old sagging buildings. So with that being said, we're going to take a commercial break. Other side of the break, we're getting to our next three stories. This is Peter Zalewski of the Condo Vultures Podcast. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. And I wanted to alert you that if you have a property that you're looking to sell in the Tri-County, South Florida area, I would encourage you to reach out to Jenny Cortez, a licensed real estate broker with CVRRealty.com. She's my partner. She's been in the business for north of 15 years. More importantly, she knows the market. She knows how to get a deal done. And she also realizes that it's more important to get a price that you can accept and sell the property rather than to hold firm on some price that's never going to be achieved and ultimately languish on the market. So if you're looking to do a deal that you want a skilled expert who can help you sell a property, reach out to Jenny Cortez at 305-865-5859, 305-865-5859, or visit her website, CVRRealty.com. Welcome back to the Miami Reporters Roundtable. I'm your host, Peter Zalewski. We talked about three articles that I handpicked in the previous segment. Now we're going to get to the next three stories. John, we're going to go to you. John Gruss, we'll go to you with this story. This is coming out of the Commercial Observer. I'll read you the headline, then I'll read you the next few graphs. Headline, Terra to buy waterfront Miami site for $1.2 billion. And here's the first couple graphs. A joint venture led by David Martin's Terra has announced plans to buy a waterfront site near downtown Miami for $1.2 billion in what could become one of the country's priciest land acquisitions. The 15.5 acre parcel at 1431 North Bayshore Drive between MacArthur and the Venetian Causeways that lead to Miami Beach offers 800 linear feet of direct frontage on Biscayne Bay, just east of the Adrian Arts Center for the Performing Arts. Anybody want to get a sense of where that is? It's just north of what I would call downtown Miami, where we had the former AAA American Airlines Arena, which is now called the, how do you say it, John? Kaseya,
yes.
Kaseya, the Kaseya Center. Remember, it was FTX until the Bitcoin scandal went down and the person who was sponsoring it got busted and they went bankrupt and he got extradited, but that's a different story. So anyways, the 15.5 acre parcel at 1431 North Bayshore Drive between the MacArthur Causeway and the Venetian that lead to Miami Beach offers 800 linear feet of direct frontage on Biscayne Bay. And here's a quote coming. It's coming from a statement from David Martin, who is leading the buy side group. The scale and location of the site offers the opportunity to do something spectacular, something that all Miamis can take pride in. And we will deliver nothing short of that, Martin said in a statement. For now, our team is focused on understanding the full potential of the property and the surrounding area. Our vision will evolve as we learn. Now, Jean, before I ask you to comment on it, let me just preface this by saying Genting, a group out of Malaysia that owns casinos all around the world, including in the Bahamas. They also are the owner of a cruise line, Norwegian Cruise Line, which is right down the block. Genting came in, they bought it, they wrote it out for 10 years. They tried to get legalized gambling. Basically, they crapped out, literally, and now they turn around and they dumped the site for $1.2 billion to David Martin, who is, he got an offer on the street for some $500 million to take down a condo conversion up in Miami Beach. So, Jean, what do you make of that, given the fact that another bank has failed, interest rates are on the rise, and lending is becoming much more stringent, especially as regulators see what happens if they take their eye off the ball, and next thing you know, we got a bank failure. So Jean, what's your take on this story?
Yeah, it's like deja vu all over again. No, I mean, it depends where you think we are in the cycle. If you think we're near the peak of the cycle, it may not make as much sense as if perhaps you were at the beginning of the cycle. And, maybe this is a long-term play for the next cycle. I think most people would agree that we're closer to the end of this cycle than we are to the beginning. And if they purchase the property, without a vision, according to the statements, they may be waiting for the next cycle. These things take a long time to plan and build and get approved and all of that. So, you're looking at maybe, 5 or 6, 7 years before something ever comes out of the ground there. And that might be the next cycle of building in Miami, because, I think most people would agree that we're near the end of this cycle. With the way things are going, interest rates on the rise, slowing the economy. That's kind of that's how I see it.
So Jean, right next to this site where the Miami Herald used to stand, it's right there on the bay. Nice piece of dirt. And right next to the site is a former mall that was called the Omni Mall. It's now been turned into education. It's got a hotel at the top. Genting's plan was to go ahead and use that mall, which has a hotel, and bring in legalized gambling while it was actually constructing on the dirt next door. Vacant dirt doesn't generate revenue unless you put up some tents and you rent it out to like an Art Basel. Interesting enough, as part of this deal, David Martin didn't get the Genting site, which is throwing off cash from a hotel and a school and parking and other things. He only got the dirt. I don't know how many food trucks you can roll in there to generate rent and how many times you can put up a tent and try to rent out the space. How do you carry $1.2 billion piece of dirt at a time like this given the market conditions? Is that possible, or should I maybe say this is a rhetorical question, because I don't think anybody knows how you can do it?
Well, I don't know that they spelled out the financing details.
It says to come at a later date. Financing terms will come at a later date. So you're suggesting maybe it's seller financing. Maybe the seller's holding paper.
That's certainly possible. You can get pretty creative with that. And you can, there's ways to structure it so that's, it's not all at once. So, who knows? The financing is the key is going to be the key to the project. So, until we really know those details, the timing of it is still, way out in the future, in my opinion, because we're at the peak of the market. And anyway, it's going to be interesting to see who finances it. It's not going to be your traditional banks. That's for sure. It's going to be private equity. It's going to be somebody with a very long-term horizon. It's going to be perhaps a partner in future developments. Who knows? They're playing it kind of close to the vest, but I'm sure they've thought through this, even though they say that they haven't thought it through yet.
So Lidia, we're going to go to you on the next story, but I'm just wondering, because this is like a commentary and analysis type of program, is there anything on the street that maybe you can offer related to this particular piece, or anything you're hearing? Name source, unnamed source. We don't want to put out rumor, but at the same time, real estate is pretty much all just about what's heard on the street. So anything you can suggest or anything you can add before we move on to the next story?
The Genting site that Terra acquired. It was
Yes.
interesting. The day before Terra acquired it, I was like browsing through Miami-Dade County project applications through the county's website, and we still didn't know it was Terra, but the filing was trying to confirm the zoning for the site, asking to confirm that it allows 500 units per acre residential, and if I remember correctly, 500 hotel keys per acre. So I don't know if it was both or either or. I don't recall exactly, but that was like, it popped up and it just had an attorney's name. So we still didn't know it was Terra. So it kind of they're already trying to like confirm zoning, but that doesn't mean that they're ready to build or have the financing to build yet. But it was just an interesting tidbit that popped up.
Interesting. So 500, just ballpark, just to kick it around. Not to hit on this, but I find it very interesting. So you got 500 units per acre, roughly. You got 15.5 acres. You do some rough math, and I guess that's how you come up with $1.2 billion. So I guess they're buying the dirt based on, on that, but I don't know. I guess we're gonna have to see how it goes on. Anybody got any comments? I know there's a lot of people out there saying it's the greatest thing, gonna help Miami. Send your comments to inquiry@CondoVultures.com, INQUIRY@CondoVultures.com. If you send us a video clip, we'll include it in the next podcast and we'll share it with the audience. So I don't want to piss on everybody's parade, but we'll see. So Lidia, we're going to go to you with story number 5. This is a piece you wrote, and we're fortunate enough to be able to ask you questions about it because I think this is a good one. Coming out of The Real Deal, headline, a phenomenon. What's holding up South Florida's projects? No, it's not just high interest rates on financing. That's delaying construction. Here we go. First couple graphs. Developer Jerry Aguirre has plans for a 220-unit apartment complex in West Kendall, but until next year or maybe even 2025, the community will exist only on paper as the site remains untouched by construction crews. Here's a quote from Aguirre. We want to start construction, but we need to hold it. The story goes on to say the project's on pause due to a series of headwinds that are causing perfect storm for developers. In the mix are rising interest rates, costlier building materials and labor, plus skyrocketing insurance premiums. We're going to go through all the entitlement process, getting all the approvals in place to be ready when something gives, whether it's construction costs or the capital market. And Gary said, Lidia, what's the temperature of these developers? Developers are gunslingers by nature. In order to have a vision, go forward and try to build something, especially when you build it on spec, even with financing, you got to sort of have an idea of what's coming. We also have to be able to sell a vision. What's sort of the vibe out there by developers? Are they selling it, or on the other side, they're really sort of hesitant and they're getting caught up with the high price of eggs and inflation and everything else that most people are doing? Or are many of them committed to this concept that Miami is the gateway to Latin America? Everybody from New York is coming here. The population will only continue to increase. So I wonder if you could just sort of address that, the reality versus the fluff, let's say, and just sort of provide more insight.
So I'm sure that there are plenty of developers, big names, or probably well capitalized to start. I don't know if this were a fact, but just maybe as a disclaimer. But the reality is a lot of people are like Jerry Aguirre of SH Communities. They've built thousands of residential and apartment units in Florida. But really they can't absorb this trifecta of factors between high construction costs and increasing insurance rates, which they had been dealing with for quite a while now, but now add the high interest rates. A lot of developers do have big plans, but as I reached out to them, they're kind of like, yeah, we're still planning on it, but definitely just focusing on entitlement and zoning right now. Testing out the waters for financing, but more than likely won't be starting until late this year or early next year. So definitely it's caused some delay to the building frenzy that we saw the past 2 years.
And then Lidia, just a follow-up question. Another scenario, like we talked about with the previous story. So you got this dirt, you got these, and when I say dirt, I'm talking about developable land. You got these plans, and I'm talking about entitlements, and you're just sitting there and you're not generating any cash, but yet you have to continue to pay your property taxes. You have to continue to maintain it to a certain degree. So it's an expense. It's not bringing in any revenue. Did anybody provide any insight as to A, why they want to do it, and B, how much that's going to drive up their overall development costs? Because many of them want to get in and they want to get out, because every day that goes by that they can't build, it's costing them something, whether it be in the form of property tax or anything else. And I guess C, when did they decide that, okay, it's going to take way too long before we can go ahead and build? So let's go try to turn around and dump the dirt. So I just wondered if you could provide some insight. How do you get from here to development day? Did they suggest anything?
A lot of it sounded like take it day by day, case by case. I feel like a lot of the developers, like Jerry Garrett, he's been in the game for a while. So he talked about a couple communities that he's hitting pause on. He didn't really give insight, but I'm sure it is costing him to just hold the dirt or whatever's on the dirt right now that he plans to redevelop. Obviously, there's property taxes. If it's being leased out, he probably has insurance on it, which, as we've all seen, is skyrocketing. Some of the developers I interviewed, they're in the game for the first time, so they're just much more chirpy. They're much more hopeful, although they did admit that they won't be starting construction soon, but they're hoping to hold on to their first development site.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And I will throw out this to the audience. We have a lot of newcomers to South Florida. In a couple of years, if the economy continues to slow and you see a bunch of parks in and around Miami, those are not actually parks. Those are unbuilt development sites. So feel free to appreciate them while you can. They tend to be here until the next cycle begins. So that being said, let's go on to the next story. Mr. Fakler, we're going to go to you with this story. This story is coming out of the Miami Herald. A little background before I start. Governor of Florida is called Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis is considering, according to media reports, possibly running for president on the Republican side. So that is the backdrop. Now, John, I'm going to read you the headline and I'll read you the first couple of graphs and I'll ask you to comment. Headline: the DeSantis bill would restrict non-resident land buys from China, Russia, Venezuela. Critics draw ugly comparison. First couple of graphs. A priority bill of Governor Ron DeSantis was called discriminatory by dozens of Chinese Americans on Wednesday, with some drawing comparisons to a Nazi-era law requiring Jews to register their properties with the state. HB 1355 and its companion bill, HB 264, would restrict ownership of land and property by those from 7 countries of concern, a response to reports of a Chinese company buying farmland next to a North Dakota Air Force base last year. Lawmakers stress the legislation is not meant to affect anyone living in Florida. The bills would prohibit anyone living in those countries from acquiring certain lands or buildings in Florida if they're not a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident. Mr. Fakler, the state of Florida, Miami-Dade County, if you look at Census Bureau data, you're going to find that more than 50% of the residents are foreign born in Miami-Dade County. And I know this says it's for people who aren't living here, but I just wonder, A, how do you think this will be viewed locally as well as nationally? And B, is this an attempt to try to make housing more affordable for locals by getting the out-of-country investors out of the game? So what's your take on this?
Well, I would say no to your second point. Miami, as we all know, is a very unique area. We have a lot of investment, real estate buyers from Venezuela, Russia. The Chinese connection is very interesting because what's happening is the Chinese nationals are buying properties and condos for their kids who go to school here. So, and a huge part of this is they're saying that the EB5 investment, which is notoriously popular here in South Florida. I don't know about the rest of the country.
If you're going to say EB5, just let me explain it to the audience. EB5 is a program where if you invest a certain amount of money, I think last time I heard it was $500,000, but you got to check with an attorney or somebody with a broker-dealer license. You invest $500,000 in a financing instrument, you then have the ability to get fast-tracked under a government program for a green card. So that's an EB5 visa. It's used to generate cash from abroad and give this incentive for people who are wealthy who want to come live in the United States. But go ahead, John. Sorry.
But I'm sure there's going to be blowback from developers and everybody because, I thought DeSantis was pro-business. This is going to, this spells perhaps a financial disaster for local real estate. You're talking about, half of the investment You're going to cut out. You're not going to allow this. You're going to prohibit EB5 investment. That my understanding from the story is that the intent was to cut down money laundering in the real estate business. But, to do so, you go out there, you have hundreds of people peeled into this hearing, led by these Chinese group claiming discrimination. And the blowback was unexpected because the bill was co-sponsored by a Democrat, which is, very curious because they thought this was just going to slide right through because it was bipartisan. And in fact, one of the, I think it was the chairman of this hearing said, we're going to have to amend this. We didn't realize we were going to have this kind of explosive response to this bill. So, I don't think this is going to fly. They're going to have to do some serious amending to this bill for it to go through, just because of the blowback.
And it makes me wonder too. The way that a lot of people get around that is they simply set up a corporation, and they become the principals, and then therefore, if they're not buying it in their own name, there's always sort of a workaround. But I just, the message is sending is what, John? What do you think this message is to the public abroad?
I actually think that he needs some serious crisis management advice because this is now. Let's not forget he's in this fight with Disney. And now he's got a second fight now on the horizon.
We're talking about DeSantis.
DeSantis, I'm sorry. Yes,
he's getting sued by Disney World,
by Disney,
Disney company, and then then the state is countersuing Disney.
Correct. And now you've got this situation. So from a political perspective, nationally, he's cooking his own goose with these. I can't believe. He's cooking his own goose locally as well. I'm sure the developers are not loving this, but nationally, he's going after very popular programs, and I don't think it's going to help him with the presidential election.
Interesting. So you think this is all moved for the presidential run he has, more so than trying to bring down prices in Florida, so residents can afford to buy?
Right. He's trying to impress on the cultural wars. That seems to be he thinks is his strength. So he's playing this up. And now it's, I think it's going to bite him in the foot. This is, pretty shocking that he had two missteps here, really back to back within a month.
Interesting. Okay. So, we're going to take a commercial break. And by the way, John, I want to thank you for not going with cooking his own mouse, but you went with cooking his own goose with the reference to Disney. So that was a good move. Yeah. So we'll
Mouse.
Yeah. So we'll
the duck, no duck references.
Yeah. No duck, no Donald Duck, none of that. All right. We're going to take a commercial break. On the side of the break, we're going to have a group discussion about a story that came out recently. And I want to get some insight from some of our journalists. So we'll see you on the other side of the break. This is Peter Zalewski of the Condo Vultures podcast. Before I started doing these podcasts, I've been in the business of being a licensed real estate broker, a contributing columnist for the Miami Herald, as well as the Miami Real Deal, but also extra witness work in consulting. So if you are looking for an expert witness, or if you're looking for consulting services, a straight talk perspective as to what's going on in a particular marketplace, a building, or what happened previously, for whatever your situation is, whether you are an attorney, whether you are an institutional fund looking to invest, or whether you're a lender who's trying to come up with some sort of strategy and approach for your lending committee going forward, I just might be able to help you. To get a hold of me, please reach out to Peter@CondoVultures.com. That's Peter@CondoVultures.com, or give me a call to the office at 305-865-5859, 305-865-5859. Welcome back to the Miami Reporters Roundtable. I'm your host, Peter Zalewski. We are now going to have a group discussion. A story came out recently in the Miami New Times. It has to do with the journalism industry. Anybody who's heard this podcast knows that the reason we do this podcast is to try to bring some straight talk to a real estate industry that tends to have a lot of fluff. The journalists we bring in here, they tend to be those people who kind of look through all the public relation pitches, the social media influencers, and all that type of stuff. So we are going to discuss a story that came out in the New Times. It has to do with layoffs occurring at the Miami Herald, which is a major daily. It's won a shit ton. And that is a journalistic term, a shit ton of Pulitzers. It's got a reputation for really going in there and sort of shining the light, if you will, on the marketplace. So I'm going to read you the headline and read you the first couple of graphs, and then I'm going to ask each of us to comment. Lidia is still an active journalist, so we're not going to ask her to comment. We're going to ask her to pick, of the three people commenting, who made the strongest argument one way or another. But we'll start off with John. We'll then go to Mr. Fakler. And then this week I get to sit in the back and I get to pick and choose which one's going to make the most sense to try to get Lidia's vote. So let me go ahead. I'll read the headline and we'll read the first couple graphs. New Times. Hedge fund owned McClatchy axed Miami Herald employees on Good Friday. Anybody who doesn't know, Good Friday is a Christian holiday. And here we go. McClatchy, one of the largest newspaper companies in the United States, revealed layoffs this month at the Miami Herald and El Nuevo Herald in the worst round of job cuts to the paper's news staff since 2019, according to One Herald Guild. On Good Friday, April 7th, McClatchy revealed it was laying off 6 employees, including a local research director, 2 copy editors, a technology and finance reporter, a page layout designer, and a production staffer who works on the interactive features for special projects. Here's a quote. Today, we notify 6 of our colleagues that their positions have been eliminated effective April 23rd, 2023. Monica Richardson, McClatchy's vice president of news for large markets, wrote an internal email that Friday evening. We recognize how difficult that it is for these colleagues, but we are working diligently to provide them with the information they need during this transition. The layoffs reflect a trend of cost cutting, plaguing local newsrooms with hedge funds and private equity companies at the helm. Major newspaper chains. New Jersey-based hedge fund manager Chatham Asset Management purchased McClatchy and its 30 newspapers in late 2020 after the company, whose outlets had been in the McClatchy family for 170 years, declared bankruptcy. Guys, what do you make of this? A, you're playing people off. B, you're doing it on a religious holiday for some. Are they doing it because they think most people are going to be off who practice that religion and they're not going to see this story? Or are they trying to, is it a sucker punch? What do you guys make of the Good Friday announcement? And then what do you make of the future of journalism in South Florida if the Miami Herald is basically getting gutted? Who's left? Now I should say the Real Deal has many people on staff and they seem like they're continuing to grow. And Lidia, you don't have to say anything about that. I just know from looking at the outside and talking to people. So Jean, what's your take about that? Take on that Good Friday and what does it mean for the future of journalism and who steps into place, whether it's the Real Deal or anybody else?
Well, I mean, I think Good Friday was coincidental. I mean, I really don't think like people make business decisions based on what day of the week it falls, or even if it's a religious holiday. I mean, and as far as newspapers and the future of journalism, I mean, look, I mean, the Miami Herald and all Florida newspapers have been gutted. This gutting of newspapers has been going on for years. I mean, I worked at the Tampa Tribune. Tampa Tribune was one of the top 50 newspapers in the country. We had, huge circulation. We had a newsroom with 350 people. And when I joined them in the 90s, and it doesn't exist anymore. It's gone. It's been shut down, and everybody's either been laid off or sent to work for the St. Pete Times, which itself is essentially disappearing as well. So, I mean, but the future of journalism, I mean, I think it's with publications like The Real Deal. It's with new forms of digital media. It's even nonprofits. I think ProPublica and other efforts like that are going to be the future of journalism. I have a friend who's a retired journalist from the Minneapolis Star Tribune who just retired actually 3 months ago, and he moved to North Carolina, Asheville, North Carolina, and now he's part of a group of retired newspaper reporters who have volunteered their time to work at the local newspaper to do local journalism for free, and that's the kind of thing that might help the local journalism thrive. I mean, I think there are a lot of retired journalists who are twiddling their thumbs probably right now and thinking, hey, what can I do to contribute to my local community? So, I mean, it's going to be in a variety of forms. Now, I mean, digital media is not going to be the cure-all. I mean, I think I was reading today that Vice Media, for example, is about to file for bankruptcy. So, I mean, that was like the super hot, uh, media outlets. This is not South Florida, obviously, but I think digital media is not necessarily going to be the panacea, because it's really hard to make money. It's really hard to sell ads. Basically, advertising is a commodity online. So, it's the business model doesn't exist anymore. I don't know. If you walk around in Miami, I haven't seen a hard copy of the Miami Herald in years. I mean, there are no newspaper boxes. There's no, there's just, the print is gone. And that's really the moneymaker. And if you want to go back even further, the classified ad business basically collapsed after Craigslist appeared and basically offered a free way for people to list their lawnmowers and, whatever else they wanted to sell. Instead of paying the newspaper $500, they could do it for free. So, yeah, it's been a slow drip, and I don't think newspapers in their old form are going to be around much longer, unfortunately.
So, Mr. Fakler, Jean makes the case that the Good Friday is just coincidental. It's the beginning of a quarter, so we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. You believe in that? Do you think that's
Yeah.
right?
I actually agree with him. I
Okay.
believe it was a coincidence, although I think it still was a sucker punch felt by them. I mean, I'm sure the reporters think of it otherwise, that it was, done on purpose, but I think it was probably a coincidence.
No, Mr. Fakler, Jean makes some good, he makes some great points about how it used to be and how everybody's adjusting. Makes me think of Dan Christensen, who runs
The Broward Bulldog.
Yeah, who runs Florida Bulldog. After
Yeah.
some changes, I think he was working at the Sentinel at the time. I worked with him back in the day at the Daily Business Review. He's launched the Florida Bulldog, and he's sort of doing that. He's tapping into some real, hard hitting type of journalists. They're doing a lot of stories, so that gives us reason for optimism. But Mr. Fakler, I'm wondering, what about like AI? We're hearing about this ChatGPT, and if they're laying people off like this already, and ChatGPT wasn't really that much of an issue back then. I mean, you got a strike they're talking about in Hollywood with the Writers Guild because they want to be protected and don't want ChatGPT to take them over. What's sort of your outlook on the journalism industry, especially as it pertains to South Florida?
Well, you just took it right out of my mouth. I was going to mention AI.
That's got to be a vote
You
for
knew
me,
that
Lidia.
too, didn't you? We've been talking about AI recently as far as marketing and other avenues, but I really think that reporting may be going that way. I know a lot of copywriting avenues are going that way. Could it be reporters going that way? I don't know. It will be. I still think, one of the things that this hurts is the local community reporting. When you're missing reporters, reporting on the local stuff, it doesn't. It's kind of interesting when you look at a story that's local. For example, the collapses of these buildings. You need boots on the ground. Do the initial reporting because you need the specifics. You're not going to have that without local reporters. I think that's the first thing that's gonna be hurt by this move away from traditional journalists and journalism. And I'm not really excited about seeing AI in the future and how that might be influencing journalism in general. It's gonna take. I mean, you're gonna lose a whole job market. I mean, all the hundreds of thousands of journalists are going to lose their jobs, and it's going to be replaced by robots. Is that possible? Or maybe I'm making too much of it.
Well, a lot of writers I've heard. Well, not a lot, but I've heard many examples of writers, and I've heard them on whether it be NPR programs or it'd be like Bill Maher or something like that. The way they say they're using AI is they're taking their work or their notes, they're giving it to AI. AI is basically writing something, and it's basically the first draft for them, and it's making it easier. You know, sometimes when you're writing a story, once you get the lead, then the rest of it flows. Well, they're actually having the AI create it, and now they're able to produce more content with actually less effort, but they can bring the expertise and the local know-how into it. The part I'm looking forward to too, if Sean is right and if John is right, I'm thinking all these public relations firms that hire a bunch of individuals to go there and badger the hell out of reporters, sending them emails and calling them and tell them how great their clients are and how wonderful this building is and how this will be the last piece of oceanfront property ever. And if you don't buy this one, you'll never have it. The building is waterproof and nothing can go wrong. And this architect is a starchitect, and if they build it and design it, there's not going to be anything better. What are all these public relations people who are billing people 5 Gs a month and basically calling it and bugging reporters a couple times a month? What are they going to be doing for work? So these public relation people might also be out on their ass looking for a job the same way a lot of the journalists are. But I'm not sure how the public relation people are able to sort of spin it. Where do they go? They go and they become influencers? Well, who are you going to influence? If there's no journalists, who is there to influence as a public relation person? And why are you dropping 5 Gs if you are a client? Why don't you just go on Google? Why don't you just go on Facebook? Why don't you go on Instagram and just pay for the ads and have them placed rather than wasting your time on these PR people who are pain in the ass for journalists? So what say you, John?
Well, I mean, PR people can leverage AI much like the reporters who created the first draft and create a ton of content. And Google is so smart now that it can pick up on well-written, well-edited content and, deliver to Google users what they want. So I think PR firms are going to be fine. They're going to figure it out. It's going to be, they're going to be pumping out material content, and it's going to be better content, and AI will sift through it and pick it out. Because what AI does, it basically scours the internet, to find the information. So if you can put it out there, this is going to be the PR's job, is to put it out there. And I think it already is. I mean, I think most marketing and PR firms, they place a really huge amount of importance on content, well-written content, because that matters in terms of search, and it matters in terms of, what eventually gets picked up. So they won't be pitching to journalists. They'll be pitching to robots.
There you go. Mr. Fakler, any comments? Your closing statement. I'll have mine, and then Lidia will tell us who's got the best argument or who came off the best here.
Well, interestingly enough, they're saying that advertising and content is now the most popular, most revenue generating advertising there is. So
you're saying advertorials?
Yeah, believe it or not, I just read a story about this recently. I don't know. I agree with everything Sean said. Although, I'm a little perturbed by this influencer phenomenon. To me, it dilutes serious news. People, going out there, I'm an influencer, I'm a journalist. Half of them are whacked out conspiracy theorists. And, I guess there's a way to parse through that. Maybe that's the future, to be able to parse through that and to find the real legitimate content. But, don't even talk to me about influencers. To me, social media is great for me for marketing things and et cetera, being very specific. But, this whole influencer culture, I just want to, put my head in the oven.
Understood. And let me just be clear. I wasn't taking a shot at you two guys who happen to do some marketing and public relations when really? I said blowing smoke up the ass of clients.
Okay.
I was talking about the annoying individuals who didn't know what the hell they were pitching. Let me bring it full circle, because everybody's going to say that I'm Chicken Little and I'm pissing on the parade. Let me give you some good news to end on. The good news is, back in the 1980s, Miami had 2 newspapers. They had a Miami Herald, they had a Miami News. Lo and behold, the Miami News, which I think was the evening paper, it shut down. They merged, and then it shut down. And what came of that was some of the people involved with Miami News, they went on and started their own newspaper called Miami Today. I went on, and that's why I started in Miami. Lydia, did you not work at Miami Today?
Yeah.
At some point, yeah. So Michael Lewis used to work at Miami News. He and some others got together and they set it up. So I guess where I'm going with this is, always when it seems like it's dark, there's always something around the corner, at the end, you're still going to need the journalists to stay away from all these wackos that Mr. Fakler was referring to. And if you want to send an email, send it to inquiry@CondoVultures.com and dedicate it to Mr. Fakler. So that being said, it seems like it's very dangerous right now. It seems like it's very scary. There's layoffs going on, but everybody's going to be forced to adjust. And that includes PR people as well as journalists. But I think there will be a way for ingenuity, especially in a town like this, where everybody seems to be an entrepreneur, for us to ultimately come out of it. And I think The Real Deal is a perfect example. I remember when they started back in 2008, when they came down here in Miami and they had a little correspondent. They had one correspondent, I didn't say little like, I would have been condescending, but they had one correspondent in Miami. And then lo and behold, they've been able to build it because they were grinding. They had a vision and they're giving the market something it needs. South Florida Business Journal, another example.
Yeah,
they are still
point.
grinding it. Yeah, they're still grinding it. So let's be hopeful that these journalists who get they get tossed out, they're able to show up somewhere else, just like Jan Christensen did that with the Florida Bulldog, and John, your friend, did in Asheville, North Carolina. Because Lord knows we need some good news. So Lidia, who's the most convincing, or who would you like to listen to the longest?
Okay, I hate to pick like winners and losers, but
please, no participation trophy.
I think overall I agreed with the points made. I agreed with both John and John that
nice.
Good Friday didn't really play a role in the layoffs, but I do. Whoever made the point that like ChatGPT, if anybody, I don't think ChatGPT, let me just give my opinion. I don't think ChatGPT is going to like put reporters or PR people out on the street. I think the point that was made that like a reporter can use it as an aid, or PR people can use it as an aid, was like the best point. And it kind of shows like, yeah, like you said, like this town finds ingenuity and continues growing. So I don't think ChatGPT is going to be like doom and gloom for anyone, honestly.
So John wins.
Well, see, there you go. We got some
I see
positive.
Peter
Well, if I
smiling, he
win,
loves it.
you lose.
You lost, Fakler.
I always lose.
I'm a push.
I tried.
So let's go ahead and wrap up this podcast. I want to thank our panel. I want to thank John Gruss. He was a journalist for over 25 years. Right now, he's a public relations and marketing firm. He's not the type that blows smoke up everybody's ass, like I referred earlier. This is a good one. If you want to get a hold of John, go to his website, GrussPR.com. That's GRUSSPR.com. I also want to thank Mr. Fakler. John Fakler was a journalist for over 20 years, wrote about white-collar crime. He also wrote about business stories and did restaurant reviews. He's a New York Jets fan, and he finally got his Aaron Rodgers. Although his New York Knicks are not going to do very well, if you want to get a hold of Mr. Fakler, who does public relations and marketing consulting, get a hold of him at Fakler@consultant.com. That's Fakler@consultant, singular.com. And I want to thank Lidia Dinkova. She is a staff reporter over at The Real Deal. She's been a journalist for north of 10 years. She likes to crack skulls. She likes to dig, finds out some great stories. Lydia was a great addition for our podcast this particular week. Anybody wants to get a hold of Lydia, they can send her an email at The Real Deal. It's Lydia.Dinkova@therealdeal.com. And I'm Peter Zalewski of CondoVultures. I want to thank you for tuning in. We appreciate that. Remember, if you have any comments for us, send an email to inquiry@CondoVultures.com, INQUIRY@CondoVultures.com. And also, too, if you want to watch this podcast, don't forget to check us out on a platform that provides for videos such as Spotify, and our YouTube handle is CondoVulturesTV. Go Miami Heat, and we'll catch up soon. Ciao, ciao.
Don't buy a South Florida condo, discounted or distressed, before taking a Condo Vultures correction tour. CondoVultures.com offers weekly bus and walking tours that focus on educating buyers on the how-tos of identifying discounted condos, analyzing the opportunities, and purchasing units. Every tour attendee receives a list of all condo projects in a particular market, a market assessment handout, and unmatched expert analysis. For more information on the condo correction tours, please visit CondoVultures.eventbrite.com.